Hello, my name is Katie and I am here today to do book reviews on some controversial books that I've read recently. I don't do a lot of single book reviews, and this is actually a dual book review. I thought the topics covered in these two books had some similarities that I thought meant they would pair well together, but also these are books that people either seem to love or hate. So I thought that could be fun to discuss because one of these I hated and one of these I loved. So we'll just get started. We'll go with the one I read first, which was The Maidens by Michaelides. We're following Mariana. She's a group therapist who lost her husband a year prior and is still dealing with the grief that led to. Her niece goes to Cambridge, which is Mariana's alma mater, and she calls her one day and she's distraught because the police have found a body and her friend Tara is missing. So Mariana goes to Cambridge to comfort her, as, you know, she should. She has always been a mother figure in Zoe's life. And she gets there, and she and Zoe are talking, and Zoe has this professor. He's a classics professor, and she's very uncomfortable around him. She doesn't seem to trust him. She almost seems to be afraid of him. And based on some things that Zoe says, this leads Mariana to believe that he is, in fact, responsible for Tara's murder. Now, the professor in question, his name is Edward Fosca. He is a classics teacher. He specializes in Greek tragedies, and he has this little group of sycophantic students known as the Maidens. They are all beautiful, accomplished women, and they're his special group of girls. He has extra tutoring sessions with them, etc. And Mariana's pretty convinced that he is the problem because she specializes in group therapy, so she knows how group interactions work, and she sees things that maybe other people wouldn't. Something else that's kind of suspicious about this whole situation is that Tara was a member of the Maidens, and the Maidens are the only people who are able to give Professor Fosca an alibi. To the chagrin of the lead detective, Mariana gets herself involved in the case. Now, many things about this book bothered me. I think the first and foremost, though, is that there are certain men who just should not write female characters, and I think Michaelides is one of them. I didn't mind him so much in The Silent Patient, but the main person he was telling the story from, the main point of view, was a man in that, and I think that helped make that a better read, in my opinion. He doesn't seem to understand what motivates women and why women make the choices that they do, and so that made Mariana come off as a very false character, and it also made Zoe not feel very real either. The second thing that really just drove me nuts is, like, nobody in this book shows an ounce of common sense. Ever. Not Mariana, not Zoe, no one. There is... people keep asking, like, Mariana why she's so stuck on it being Edward Fosca because he has an alibi. And I'm like, you're trusting the alibi of this group of girls who are obsessed with this man? Like, that doesn't seem real to me. It doesn't feel like anybody would take that seriously. It's like when somebody's mother gives them an alibi. You accept it, but all suspicion is not shoved aside from just that thing. And Zoe especially, it makes me mad here because she's the one who leads her aunt to believe that Edward Fosca is worthy of suspicion and probably is the person who killed Tara. And then later on, Zoe insinuates that Mariana's just obsessed with Professor Fosca and maybe she's in love with him and that's why she can't stop, thinking about him or whatever. And she's, like, questioning why Mariana still suspects him even though he had an alibi. And it's like, well, because of you. You're the reason I suspect him. You suspected him. It made no sense. It was like the dumbest section of this book. It made me so mad when I read it. The third thing that drove me batty is that Mariana would come to these absurd conclusions that she just like pulled out of thin air and had no basis to think that that could be what was happening. And Michaelides would just write this off as because of her knowledge of group therapy, or because she's a therapist, that's what led her to believe this. And I'm like actually scratching my head because the two just didn't seem to correlate. This happens a lot in thriller, detective novels, anything like that, where authors will just come to these ridiculous conclusions and then just explain it away as, oh, well, she just knew this because of her police training, or she just knew this because of her psychiatric training. Like, no, I need a little bit more there. And then the final thing that I just feel like I need to mention is the author mentioned, at least on 2 occasions, he references his first book, The Silent Patient. And that I found to be jarring. It was unnecessary. And it, like, pulled me out of the story because then I was sitting there thinking, oh, well, how does this relate to what happened there? And the 2 stories really don't, as far as I can tell. And I'm like, are you just trying to remind me that you wrote a book that I did like? And that you're capable of writing a book that I do like? Because this is not the way to do that. This just made this reading experience even worse for me. So if you can't tell, I didn't like that book. At all. Normally I'm pretty okay when it comes to thrillers. I'm willing to suspend disbelief in order to be entertained. But this one, not so much. Add to that there wasn't really much in the way of atmosphere. It seems like he was trying to go for like Donna Tartt levels of pretentiousness, but couldn't even scratch that surface. And so a lot of things just fell completely flat for me. And then the ending, I don't think I've ever been so annoyed by an ending, because it made no sense, it came out of nowhere, and it was utterly ridiculous. The next book I want to talk about is Madam by Phoebe Wynne. I read this one quite recently, and this one I really enjoyed. Rose Christie is our main character. She is a classics teacher, and she gets a job at the prestigious Caldonbray Hall that is in the Scottish Highlands. It has been around for 150 years. It is very well known. It is very highbrow. It is very, it's a place of privilege. Now, Rose really needed something like this, a good paying job, because her mother, I believe she has MS, and she is in a home because she requires an extensive amount of care at this point. So going into this, you know that Rose really needs this job, and her mother is very much pressuring her to take this job. When Rose arrives at Caldonbray, it's immediately apparent to her that nothing is as it seems. She hears about a student who died the previous year that nobody bothered to tell her about. Nobody wants to talk about her predecessor, and it seems that she has left the school under pretty mysterious circumstances. So Rose is already off balance as soon as she gets there, aside from being completely out of her depth, because she is in a place where they haven't hired any new teachers in probably forever. All the teachers were either former students or friends or family of former students, so everybody has a connection to the school. Rose is the first person they've ever hired in from outside the family, so to speak, and she's considerably younger than the other employees there, and the students don't really respect her. She doesn't get on with them, and it takes a toll because she just feels like she's failing, and this is a disaster. Eventually, though, Rose manages to get through to a few of the students, and her life becomes a little bit better, but she stays pretty much on edge the entire book, because there is an issue with a student who is seemingly obsessed with her and starts making accusations against her, and she is under investigation because of that. She is shut out of a lot of things that the rest of the staff is in on because she's on probation. It's just a very bizarre and uncomfortable situation. One of the things that I did really like about this book is Rose, as an outsider coming in, continually points out the privilege and the sexism and the racism that is happening at this school, and she just keeps getting brushed off, and she's getting so frustrated by it And I thought that was a very nice addition. It makes sense too, because they discussed the relationship that Rose and her mother had. Her mother was a staunch feminist. She was of the bra-burning generation, and she taught Rose a lot about equal rights. And Rose carried that through her life. She also came from a background that wasn't exactly wealthy and privileged, so she sees things that the other employees there just don't, and they don't care to be honest. Rose also starts to learn pretty quickly that at this school there is a secret. The students know, the rest of the staff knows. She is the only one who is not being let in on it. She is eventually told, but not in the manner in which they had intended to tell her. And it's one of those things that wasn't necessarily hard to guess. I kind of saw where it was going, but I so badly did not want it to be the case that I kept telling myself, no, it can't be. I'm explaining it away. No, it can't be. And then it was what I thought. And I was as horrified as Rose was. The problem is, at this point in the book, they have a lot on Rose. Enough that it's okay to let her in on the secret and still have them feeling safe about it, because they don't see her as a threat. I don't really want to say any more about any of it, to be honest. There is a part of me that thinks I may have already said too much. So maybe I'll just go into some of the criticisms about the book. I was looking at some Goodreads reviews, and a lot of people just really didn't like the book. Some people downright hated it. Nobody who disliked the book seemed to care for Rose. There were a lot of things saying she was naive and lacking in common sense. And I get that. There were times that I kind of felt that way about her too. But when I put myself in her shoes, it wasn't hard for me to see why she was turning into the bit of a loose cannon. And so, like, while I think it is a valid criticism, I just don't agree with it, because I can imagine myself behaving in the exact same way if I were in Rose's position. Because yes, Rose is definitely naive, and she's fairly young, and I don't actually think she was blind to the goings-on. I don't think it's that she just didn't see it at all. I think it was a combination of she couldn't fathom that something of that caliber could be happening, and also that she needed this job so badly that she didn't want to see it. So I don't think it's necessarily that she's just really stupid and like just blind. I think it was a lot of intentional blindness, if that makes any sense. The second criticism I saw popping up a few times is that despite the book taking place in 1992 and 1993, people were complaining that it doesn't feel that way at all, that it feels more like the early 1900s. And this, I'm not sure, I think is a valid criticism, because of the way the school functions. It is mentioned several times that the place is antiquated and that the workings of the school really haven't changed since it was built in the late 1800s. And I think that was fully the author's intention. When you got to the school, you were supposed to feel like you'd been transported back in time. It wasn't supposed to feel modern. That was the whole point. While I definitely see how this is a polarizing read, it's one that worked for me. Other than, I think maybe there could have been a bit more atmosphere in the writing, and I for sure could have done without the epilogue. I really have no other complaints. So those are two books that I read recently. One I loved, one I hated. There were some similarities that I felt made them easy to pair together in a dual book review. Let me know how you feel about this format. Let me know if you have read or plan to read either one of these books. Thank you for watching. I hope to see you soon. Bye.